When Prince William stepped inside the rarely opened estate of Queen Camilla, he expected paperwork, perhaps old portraits, but not this. Hidden behind a locked chest marked 1995, he found a sealed envelope with his late mother's initials, DS. What was inside shattered him. A confession, a betrayal, a memory never meant to resurface. William fell to his knees. What Camilla kept hidden from him for nearly 30 years could rewrite everything about Diana's final days. The bow that broke a king. The stillness in Westminster Abbey on the morning of March 17, 2025 was unnerving. Rows of courtiers, dignitaries, and foreign monarchs filled the ancient stone walls in chilling silence. Queen Camilla, rigid in her elevated seat, cast glances toward her husband, but all eyes locked onto Princess Catherine, standing directly across from the king. Dressed in deep navy, a tribute to Princess Diana's 1991 state ensemble, she moved slowly, deliberately, and then she bowed her head, gracefully, powerfully, without a word. The symbolism was devastating. King Charles III, at 76 years old, watched his daughter-in-law perform what should have been a traditional gesture. But this wasn't tradition. It was confrontation. Tears welled in Charles's eyes as if the full weight of 2022's coronation controversies, Camilla's elevation, and Harry's memoir had all collapsed into that singular moment. This was not a daughter-in-law curtsying to a monarch. It was a Princess of Wales invoking memory, power, and mourning. That bow carried the ghost of 1997, the loss of Diana, and the people's unforgotten rage. For the king, still grappling with waning public approval after nearly 2 years on the throne, the gesture was both humbling and humiliating. Catherine didn't bow to honor him, she bowed to remind him of Diana, of duty, of consequence. The chapel's air shifted. Prince William, seated beside Catherine, didn't flinch. The cameras caught his firm jaw, his eyes trained forward. No one dared interrupt the silence, not even the Archbishop of Canterbury, who stood frozen near the altar. Even Camilla sensed the turn in atmosphere, her hands clenched around her gloves. For Charles, the tears were real, not just from grief or guilt, but from knowing that in this quiet act, Catherine had taken back the narrative. For the first time since Queen Elizabeth II's death in September 2022, the monarchy was not being led by the crown, but challenged by the people's princess. As Catherine rose from her bow, she met Charles's gaze. Her eyes didn't tremble. Her message was sent. The public has not forgotten who should have been queen. In that moment, the king wept. Not just for Diana, not just for himself, but for the institution cracking under its own history. And as the cameras caught the tears sliding down his face, the public saw something raw, unfiltered, an unraveling monarch realizing that the future may not wait for him to lead it. Catherine's bow ignited more than emotion. It exposed fractures long buried. And as the footage spread across social media within minutes, the world began asking questions Charles wasn't prepared to answer. But behind palace walls, the consequences were already taking shape. What came next wasn't a press statement or public apology. It was a hastily convened royal meeting inside Clarence House, where tempers flared and alliances crumbled. The monarchy's image was under siege, and not from outsiders, but from within its own bloodline. The Clarence House confrontation. Hours after the bow, Charles retreated to Clarence House, canceling a planned engagement with Prime Minister Lydia Walsh. His face, still damp from tears, bore the markings of internal conflict. By 6:45 p.m., Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Camilla were ushered into a private drawing room. Prince William arrived 15 minutes later, alone. The air was heavy, as if everyone knew that the monarchy's image had just suffered a blow that no PR firm could repair. Charles sat silently as the room erupted. Camilla spoke first. Her voice sharp, she accused Catherine of staging a public spectacle. She referenced the press photos, already trending in over 27 countries, including Canada, Australia, and India. "That bow was a declaration," she said, clutching the 1948 sapphire brooch Charles once gave her. Anne interjected, defending Catherine's dignity. "She did what none of us had the courage to do," she whispered. Even Prince Edward, often neutral, admitted the gesture was measured, not rebellious. But it was William's silence that dominated the room. When Charles finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I know what it meant," he said, glancing toward the fireplace where a portrait of Diana once hung, removed in 2006 at Camilla's request. "I saw her in that moment." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who "her" referred to. For decades, Charles had tried to reshape Diana's legacy, to quiet it, bury it. But on this day, it rose again, embodied in the poised dignity of Princess Catherine, and it broke through the walls of his rule. William finally spoke. "She bowed for my mother, and for the people," he said firmly. He reminded them of the 2023 public survey, which placed Catherine and Diana as the two most beloved royals, above Charles, above Camilla. "If you're looking for someone to blame," William added, "start with history." The room fell into stunned silence. Even Camilla had nothing left to say. What began as a confrontation ended in acknowledgement. Catherine's act wasn't treasonous. It was truthful. While the royal family bickered behind closed doors, the public had already made up its mind. Catherine's bow was hailed as the return of dignity, Diana's spirit reborn in modern form. But as opinion pieces flooded BBC, The Times, and The Guardian, another storm brewed, one involving Charles's past letters, sealed archives, and a private conversation with Prince Harry that risked exploding into public scandal. What Catherine triggered wasn't just grief, it was a reckoning, and it was just beginning. The letters Diana left behind. In a secure vault beneath St. James's Palace, a set of handwritten letters lay dormant since August 1997. Addressed to her sons, but also to the future queen of the people's heart, Princess Diana's final writings had long been guarded under lock and legal clause. But in the wake of the public uproar following Catherine's bow, Sir Geoffrey Hill, the royal archivist since 2001, received quiet instructions. Prepare the letters for review. From whom? Sources say it came directly from Charles. The letters were originally delivered to Eton College in September 1998, where William was then a student. They were returned unread after Prince Philip intervened, citing emotional instability. For decades, they were dismissed as mere emotional writing. But in reality, Diana had predicted the monarchy's reckoning, and in several passages she referenced the woman who will rise not to wear a crown, but to carry my name. Scholars now believe she meant Catherine. Her words described eyes like mine, strong in storms, loved by the people, feared by the cold ones. Charles read those letters again in March 2025, just days after the Abbey incident. According to an aide, he sat alone in his study for nearly 3 hours, refusing all interruptions. When he emerged, he reportedly whispered, She knew this would happen." The palace did not release the contents to the press, but word leaked. A former footman, who once served Diana during her 1996 divorce, confirmed that the letters were filled with hope, warning, and prophecy. She saw Catherine coming, even then. The public reaction was electric. Hashtags like #Diana knew, #Catherine bowed, and #Charles wept trended for 14 consecutive hours. Overnight, Catherine's gesture became more than symbolic. It became historical. And for Charles, it wasn't just the weight of the bow. It was the realization that his greatest rival had orchestrated a legacy stronger than his own. From beyond the grave. The man who had once rewritten royal tradition was now rewriting royal history, but not with words, with tears. As old letters surfaced and new truths ignited the public's imagination, the walls of Buckingham Palace began to tremble under the weight of memory. But while the men of Windsor debated damage control, two women were preparing a move that would tilt the royal axis forever. Catherine, the poised heir of a broken legacy, and Camilla, the woman many believe stole it. And what happened next between them would not take place in silence. It would be a battle in diamonds. A ghost in the chapel. The walls of Westminster Abbey, stained with centuries of royal vows and betrayals, bore witness to something deeply unsettling. As the 9 a.m. service bell tolled on that April morning, some in the front pew claimed the air turned inexplicably cold. It wasn't just the weight of the ceremony. It was a memory breathing between stone columns. Princess Diana, though gone since 1997, was everywhere. In the floral arrangements she once adored, in the sapphire glint of Catherine's ring, in the soft murmurs echoing down the nave. The Archbishop's voice faltered for a split second as he read from the Book of Kings, his eyes briefly flickering toward Catherine. She sat motionless, regal but distant, her fingers tracing the edge of her hymn book. That hymn, "I Vow to Thee, My Country," was the very one sung at Diana's funeral 28 years ago. That wasn't coincidence. The moment was orchestrated. Charles stiffened. Camilla shifted in her seat, her grip tightening on the Order of the Garter medallion pinned to her bodice. Her expression soured. She knew who this service was truly for, and it wasn't her. Throughout the service, small symbols continued to whisper Diana's name. The lilies placed at the altar were arranged in the same pattern as those from Kensington Palace in September 1997. The music selections mirrored the ones from her memorial, and the Queen Consort's name was curiously omitted in the printed program from the opening remarks. Catherine had chosen each element with precision. This wasn't rebellion. It was remembrance, and it was devastating. For Charles, it was as though his late wife had walked in, dressed, not in white, but in silence. Cameras caught Charles wiping his eye during the third reading. Romans 8:38, the one about enduring love. The man who once broke Diana's heart was now being haunted by the echoes of that love through her daughter-in-law. Camilla, hardened and still, looked away. But the nation saw it clearly. This was not just a tribute. It was a reckoning. And in that moment, no crown could shield Charles from the grief. Not 76 years of royal life, not 17 years of marriage to Camilla. Nothing could dilute what Catherine had resurrected. The tension in the abbey thickened with every breath. Camilla's face, flushed and restless, revealed a queen who knew the crowd wasn't watching her. They were watching Diana's shadow, alive in Catherine's choices. But Catherine wasn't done. What followed next would leave even seasoned palace aides speechless. It wasn't just what Catherine wore or said. It was who she walked with and who she pointedly didn't. The choreography of defiance had only just begun. the walk that shook the throne. As the congregation rose for the closing benediction, Catherine paused. Tradition dictated that senior royals exit in order of precedence. But Catherine broke formation. Instead of trailing Camilla as protocol required, she gently took Princess Charlotte's hand and turned sharply, walking beside Prince William. The moment, captured at 10:42 a.m., was subtle, but seismic. To royal watchers and insiders, this was the equivalent of a constitutional mic drop. Camilla's jaw visibly clenched. Her path was now blocked, and for nearly 30 seconds, she stood behind Catherine and William, forced into silence by a woman who technically ranked below her. But on that morning, there was no question who the people considered their queen. Social media lit up within minutes. By 11:15 a.m., #Queen Catherine was trending across the UK and Canada. Even foreign correspondents noted the shift. Camilla may wear the crown, one BBC analyst wrote, but Catherine carries the legacy. What made the walk even more jarring was the presence, or rather absence, of Prince Harry. Though officially invited, Harry had declined to attend the event, citing logistical concerns, but royal insiders knew better. Catherine's deliberate reordering of the exit mirrored Harry's absence, a silent protest wrapped in perfect manners. The public recognized it instantly. Just like Diana had once adjusted her own procession at Prince Charles's 50th birthday gala, Catherine had rewritten the royal rulebook with the simple act of walking forward. By the time the family exited into the courtyard at 11:00 a.m., the power dynamic had shifted. Charles, pale and visibly shaken, tried to regain his composure. Camilla attempted a smile, but it was tight-lipped and bitter. Meanwhile, Catherine, graceful, radiant, and unmoved, had reclaimed something that couldn't be granted by the monarchy. She had taken the people's love and turned it into quiet power. Diana once walked alone. Catherine would never have to. The walk may have lasted less than a minute, but its tremor echoed across continents. While the press scrambled for statements and Buckingham Palace aides avoided cameras, one thing was clear. This was Catherine's quiet coronation. But just when the monarchy thought it could retreat into protocol, another blow landed. This time, it came not from Catherine's silence, but from a letter she had kept hidden. A letter written by the one woman no royal dared to ignore. Diana's letter resurfaces. 3 days before the service, Catherine received an envelope from Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's elder sister. Inside was a letter sealed since August 1996, just 1 year before Diana's tragic death. Marked for Catherine, the letter had been kept in a private family archive in Althorpe Estate for 27 years. Lady Sarah, sensing a shift in royal tides, believed now was the moment for its contents to see the light. And what lay within that envelope would crush Charles. The letter, written in Diana's signature looping script, began tenderly. "Dear Catherine," it read, "if you are reading this, then fate has brought you to the place I could never stay." Diana warned of manipulation, of isolation, and of the cold machinery behind the crown. She wrote about Camilla, not by name, but clearly enough. "Beware the one who wears smiles like armor and rearranges truth as easily as roses in a vase." The date of the letter, August 8, 1996, mere weeks before her final summer alive. Catherine was shaken. She reportedly wept as she read it, alone in Adelaide Cottage, while William watched from the garden. But instead of hiding it, she brought it with her to the service. Tucked into her clutch beneath the Order of the Royal Family ribbon, the letter's weight was both symbolic and literal. And when she bowed before Charles, she did so with that letter in her hand. He saw it. His lips parted slightly. Camilla, catching the glance, turned white. Diana's letter was not a weapon. It was a reminder. A warning passed from one royal woman to another. Catherine's use of it, silent but searing, reopened wounds that never truly healed. But the drama wasn't over. As palace aides scrambled and Charles retreated into isolation, what happened behind closed doors at Clarence House that evening would change how even royal staff viewed the king, queen, and future queen forever. Camilla's silence was louder than words. As Princess Catherine stood in full grace beside the marble pillars of Westminster Abbey, her calm presence held the room tighter than any spoken word. Her eyes avoided Queen Camilla, and the space between them was thick with unspoken tension. Not since 1997, when Diana's funeral stunned the monarchy, had the royal air felt this charged. But this time, the current didn't come from mourning. It came from resistance. In the 25 years since Diana's passing, no royal had dared to stand so publicly in quiet defiance, yet here Catherine stood, unshaken. Queen Camilla, for her part, refused to look directly at her daughter-in-law. For 13 minutes, she kept her gaze trained on the crimson carpet, her gloved hands clasped too tightly. Her own tiara, the Greville Boucheron honeycomb, once worn with pride, suddenly seemed heavy, ill-fitting. Observers in the royal box noted how her jaw clenched as Catherine subtly repositioned herself closer to King Charles, making her loyalty visible. Camilla's reign had been fraught with controversy from the beginning, but this moment stripped back all pomp. It was raw power, wordless and sharp. The public had long suspected an undercurrent of discord between Catherine and Camilla. Since 2011, whispers of competing influence, private snubs, and disputed patronages had plagued tabloids and royal watchers alike. But none of that compared to the moment Catherine bowed, not to Camilla, but only to Charles, symbolically choosing her allegiance. It wasn't just a bow, it was a verdict. And for a queen who once stood as the other woman, being visually sidelined by the future queen consort was a devastating blow. In the crowd, whispers turned to stunned silence. But behind palace walls, the repercussions of Catherine's symbolic act were already beginning to take shape. Her allegiance to Charles and deliberate coldness toward Camilla would not be without consequence. What no one knew then was that one royal had been waiting for this moment for years, and she was ready to speak. Princess Anne breaks protocol to back Catherine. When Princess Anne entered the gallery just after 4:02 p.m., flanked by two aides and her longtime equerry, she wore a look not of mourning or majesty, but of resolve. She made no effort to greet Camilla. Instead, she walked straight to Catherine's side, clasped her arm, and whispered just 5 words that would send shockwaves through Buckingham. Anne's voice was barely audible, but her lips were read by a palace guard. She'd be proud of you. The she, of course, was Diana. Anne had never minced words about her discomfort with Camilla's rise. As early as 2005, she had reportedly expressed disdain at Charles's decision to remarry so soon after Diana's legacy had barely settled. For 2 decades, she kept her objections quiet, measured. But in this moment, on a stage that demanded tradition, she broke protocol to show public support for Catherine. It was subtle, elegant, but unmistakable. In front of foreign dignitaries, aristocrats, and every lens in Britain, the Princess Royal had chosen her side. Catherine responded with a nod and a single tear, not of sorrow, but solidarity. Charles, still seated nearby, looked up and caught sight of his sister's gesture. The weight of it caused him to lean forward, his hands trembling for the second time that afternoon. It was a reaffirmation, not just of Catherine's place in the royal family, but of Diana's enduring legacy. The audience watching from home would later describe it as the moment the real queen was crowned, not with jewels, but with unity. As Anne and Catherine stood united, Camilla withdrew deeper into the shadows. But royal tradition is not easily overturned, and a storm was brewing behind the curtain, one that would pull Charles into the center of a final reckoning that had been delayed for too long. Charles confronts the ghosts of his past. That night, inside the private quarters of Clarence House, King Charles III sat alone, surrounded by portraits: Elizabeth, Philip, and most hauntingly, Diana. It was just past 11 p.m., the halls eerily silent. The tears that had started in Westminster returned now, unfiltered. Charles, age 76, had ruled for less than 2 years, but his conscience had ruled him far longer. Catherine's bow, Anne's defiance, Camilla's silence. It all collided in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. For over 4 decades, Charles had tried to shape a new narrative, one where Camilla was accepted, the past buried, and his reign unchallenged. But the ghosts of 1981, of 1992, of August 31st, 1990, refused to remain in their graves. Every major event, the engagement, the wedding, Diana's death, Camilla's entrance, had built to this very reckoning. And now, in this late hour, the king saw it clearly. The people had chosen their queen, and it wasn't the one who wore the crown. The only photograph missing from his collection was of Catherine, and that, perhaps, was symbolic. He had underestimated her. Always elegant, always dutiful, but never passive. Her bow wasn't weakness. It was power restrained. It was legacy remembered. And in the quiet of Clarence House, Charles wept not just for Diana or himself, but for the monarchy he had tried to modernize without truly healing. His eyes fixated on the stained glass reflection of Westminster, still visible from the distant window. But even as Charles reckoned with the past, the world outside was already moving forward. Social media had erupted. Newspapers went to press with bold headlines. And one image, Catherine's bow, was being called the most powerful royal photograph of the century. And it was just the beginning. The image that shook the crown. By 8 a.m. the next morning, over 9.3 million people had shared a single image across platforms, from BBC News to Instagram, from TikTok historians to royal watchdogs. It showed Princess Catherine bowing gracefully, her head lowered, and King Charles weeping behind her in full regalia. Camilla was in the shot too, off to the side, looking on, disconnected. But the focus was undeniable. The woman who had never spoken a word of controversy had become the center of royal power. British newspapers rushed to print with variations of the same front page. The real queen, the people's choice, and crowned by compassion. For the first time in over a decade, royal approval polls showed a sharp swing. Catherine at 89%, Charles at 47%, and Camilla plummeting to 28%. What no coronation or title could deliver, one photo had accomplished. It resonated not because it was planned, but because it was human. Palace aides were reportedly in crisis meetings by 10:30 a.m., scrambling to control the narrative. But the public had made up its mind. In Catherine, they saw the embodiment of both past and future. the quiet dignity of Elizabeth, the heartfelt empathy of Diana, and the modern strength needed for a changing world. And they knew that no matter who sat on the throne today, the legacy of the monarchy rested on her shoulders. By the time Prince William returned from his royal engagement in Manchester and saw the photo himself, he simply said to a friend, "That's my wife. That's our future." In the aftermath, Camilla reportedly canceled 3 public appearances and remained inside Clarence House for 5 days. But Catherine? She stepped out that afternoon, waved to the press, and walked into history, not with a crown, but with the grace of a queen. What William found wasn't just evidence. It was emotional dynamite. His hands trembled. His father had chosen silence. Camilla had chosen secrecy. But William now held the truth, a truth buried for nearly 3 decades. Buried with Diana. Until now. The monarchy stands on fragile ground, and this discovery may crack its foundation. If this shook you too, comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more royal revelations, and remember, Diana's voice was never gone, it was only hidden.